Hello and welcome to Capitol Hill. I'm Lyndall Curtis. Today, the ACTU suspended the Health Services Union from the peak union body. The ACTU says it has zero tolerance for corruption and says the HSU hasn't done enough to fix its own affairs. The opposition is continuing to call for the Fair Work Australia investigation into the HSU to be made public, and the opposition leader says state police would be justified in seeking the report, seeking the evidence Fair Work has, and using it to pursue charges. A meeting between the state and federal education ministers seemed to have a bit less heat, with the federal minister saying all are committed to pursuing a new funding model. Joining me to discuss the day are Liberal MP Alan Tudge and Labor MP Graham Perrott. Welcome to you both.
Hi Lyndall. Hi Graham.
Good afternoon.
First to the developments in the long-running saga of the Health Services Union and the pressure on its former boss, Labor MP Craig Thomson.
We've always had zero tolerance for corruption, but we've always had a very high standard. The ACTU cannot interfere in the internal processes of unions, and clearly there have been a whole range of processes that have been going on here, some internal, some of them legal and administrative processes. But now at this stage, with the report having come out from Fair Work Australia, it was our view that we needed to make a firm stand. It's always a question of judgment, but we think the appropriate time was now.
The Prime Minister herself cannot wash her hands of this matter. It's just not good enough for the Prime Minister to say that this is none of her business, that it's all in the hands of independent bodies, because Fair Work Australia is Julia Gillard's creation. Craig Thomson is Julia Gillard's Member of Parliament. If the ACTU is no longer prepared to rely upon the Health Services Union affiliation fees, the Prime Minister should no longer rely on the vote of the Health Services Union member in the Parliament. This is a question of the Prime Minister's integrity.
We'll go first to the ACTU decision. Graham Perrott, how does the ACTU suspending the HSU from its body help the members of the Health Services Union?
Well, I guess it does send a message that the ACTU looks at impropriety, looks at inappropriate use of members' money as very serious, as any union representative body should do. I've worked for a union in the past, the Independent Education Union. I know how appropriate it is to have proper accounting, have proper checks and balances, and any suggestion that members' hard-earned dollars are being used inappropriately is abhorrent to every proper union in Australia. So I guess the ACTU has said to the HSU, get your act together and do the right thing by your members.
Alan, do you think the ACTU took the right decision to suspend the HSU until it gets its affairs in order?
Yeah, I do, Lyndall. I think they had the courage to do the right thing in distancing themselves from Craig Thomson and the Health Services Union, and I think it's now incumbent upon the Prime Minister to do the same thing. And this has been, frankly, an affair which stinks. It stinks of a cover-up. It stinks of misuse of funds, and it stinks of justice denied. And it's time that the Prime Minister herself followed the ACTU and distanced herself from the union and from Craig Thomson.
There is a difference, though, Alan, isn't there, between the way you might treat an organisation and the way you might treat an individual. While there have been allegations against Craig Thomson, there have been no charges laid and nothing has been proved in court. Hasn't the principle always been that MPs don't step down until something is proved?
Well, Lyndall, we don't need to breach that basic principle for the Prime Minister to take a moral stance here. What the Prime Minister needs to do is take a moral stance, because we know that there has been a great misuse of funds, including the use of union funds to pay for prostitutes. And Julia Gillard can do three things today. She can call for Fair Work Australia to release the report. She can secondly ask that Fair Work Australia produce the the evidence which the Department of Public Prosecutions is calling for. And thirdly, she can immediately rule out accepting any more political donations from the Health Services Union until it has received a clean bill of health. Those are the things that she can do today without overturning the presumption of innocence on Craig Thomson.
Graham, given that Alan's not calling for Craig Thomson to be expelled from the Labor Party, is there a case for Labor to put some distance between itself and the Health Services Union and to, even though Fair Work Australia is an independent body, at least call for Fair Work Australia to make that report public?
Well, there's a bit of a blurring there, but yeah, look, definitely, and there have been steps taken along that road already. And you know, the reason there is a Fair Work Australia investigation is because we had concerns about this. You know, so let's be honest and upfront about this. But we do believe in that separation of powers, basically. That let the referee do the investigations, let the referee make the decisions, and then the government will respond to those decisions.
Lyndall, this is just
let Graham finish.
For somehow that for Mr Abbott and Alan to be suggesting that the Prime Minister should, I'm not quite sure what Alan is suggesting, that the Prime Minister should step in and say, Mr Thomson, you know, we find you guilty before we've even have a decision handed down. I think is a bit bizarre, a bit strange. Let the process go. That's what's happened in the past when, you know, members of Parliament have been in the crosshairs of the DPP. That's what you let it do. You let it play out and then see the decision. Make the decision after you've got all the facts.
Alan, the opposition's accused Fair Work Australia of having an institutional go slow. How can the government though be held? How can the government though be held responsible for the operations of what is an independent body?
Well, it's a body which was the creation of the Gillard government. It is a governmental body, and yes, it operates independently. But this has been 3.5 years that this investigation has been going on. 3.5 years. Royal commissions don't take that long. Sometimes wars don't take that long. The inquiry which looked into the assassination of John F. Kennedy did not take that long. And yet this affair, which goes to the heart of the Gillard government's numbers in the House of Representatives, has taken over 3.5 years. And yet Julia Gillard has not said boo in relation to it, has not criticised the time it has taken in order to get to a conclusion, has not criticised the decision not to release the report publicly, has not criticised the fact that Fair Work Australia has not given the evidence which the Department of Public Prosecution wants in order to bring about criminal charges, and still has said nothing in relation to the acceptance of political donations from the Health Services Union, even though it is now fact that there has been a great breach of a great misuse of funds, and that the ACTU itself has disaffiliated itself from the HSU.
Graham, the ACTU acknowledged today that the allegations made against the ACTU are damaging the union movement. How much damage have they done to the Labor Party?
Well, yeah, it hasn't certainly been the Labor movement's finest hour, that's for sure. But by putting a spotlight on the impropriety, by putting a spotlight on the fact that the people could be in serious hot water over these misuse of union funds, that's the appropriate thing to do. That's what the government has done. That's what the government has facilitated through Fair Work Australia, which I think 5 minutes ago Alan just said was guilty of a cover-up. Now, I find it reprehensible to think that the public servants in that institution, public servants who are loyally serving the people of Australia, are guilty of a cover-up. He should retract that comment. I think it's an insult to the people in Fair Work Australia, who I'm sure are just doing what would have been a complicated process. Not every union, like as I said, I've worked for a union, we had good audits, we had good regular checks, and that's the best way to ensure that people aren't doing the wrong thing. But you then investigate and give people the presumption of innocence until you have the facts. I have faith in that process. And Tony Abbott coming out the day before Good Friday and saying that Julia Gillard is trying to wash her hands. I mean, that's bizarre propaganda type speaking.
I'm astounded, Graham, that you have faith in this process that has taken 3.5 years and still no result has been concluded. It is not the most complex thing to examine. It should not have taken 3.5 years, and we believe there is an institutional go slow.
We might leave this issue there. There was a couple of other things happening today. A Treasurers' meeting yesterday ended with complaints from the Conservative states, but a meeting between federal and state education ministers seemed to have ended a little more positively today.
All education ministers from all states agreeing to work with the Commonwealth, a roadmap laid out for us to get on with the task of bringing forward a proposed new education funding model that delivers great education to kids around Australia, wherever they live and no matter how much money their parents earn.
Alan, the Minister says to be serious, this reform needs to be done in an ordered and cooperative way. Is he right?
Well, I don't know the details from the ministerial meeting, but I think Peter Garrett might be a bit optimistic with his statements there. I mean, we know that the Gillard government had the Gonski review into school funding, which outlined a blueprint for school funding reform. Now, that blueprint required an extra $5 billion per annum, with the state governments supposedly paying for 2/3 of that. Now, I have not seen Mr Garrett or any of the state governments to commit to an additional cent yet. And until Mr Garrett is willing to front up with the additional money, and until he is willing to guarantee that no school will go backwards in real terms, then I have grave doubts about the future of school funding reform being led by Peter Garrett.
Graham, it does seem that at this moment the federal government isn't necessarily committed to the exact model as outlined in the Gonski report. Do you know whether you just need to get everybody on board before you say exactly what you're committed to?
Linda, I loved hearing Alan lost for words, because obviously he doesn't know how to respond to positive news of governments working together. That's not in his script, obviously. So, look, I take heart from the fact that the education ministers have come together. John Paul Langbrook, the new Queensland Education Minister, obviously has turned up to work with the other members of COAG to work out what we can do best for Australia, because I was a teacher for 11 years. I understand that productivity agenda that Australia is striving towards will come through education and things like the NBN. That's how we're going to be able to get the high-skilled jobs of the future. That's how we'll be able to make sure that my children and my grandchildren have jobs in the future. So obviously we need to work together. The old model, the SES model, had some serious problems. Too many schools were funding maintained. It was a sort of a half, I can't say that, a bit of an ad hoc model, I suppose, and it's hard to get it right. I do understand that. There are state schools that are doing it tough, but likewise there are private schools that are doing it tough. I remember working in Aboriginal communities where Aboriginal schools, I've got two in my electorate that are, have some real challenges to work out that it doesn't matter what sign is above the gate. Schools that are doing it tough need support, and schools that are doing it right need to be recognised as so doing. And
that's where we'll have to leave it today, gentlemen. Alan Tudge and Graham Perrett, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Lyndall. Thanks, Graham.
Thanks, Lyndall. Thanks, Alan.
Happy Easter.
And thank you for joining Capitol Hill today. Please be with us at the same time tomorrow. Good night.